Have you seen this? You watched The Wizard of Oz and thought it needed more decay and body horror.
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
Yes. 100%. You know, an interesting thing about this movie is that when Walter Murch was collecting ideas for it, a lot of his inspiration for the Kansas sequences came from the book Wisconsin Death Trip, which of course later became the 1999 documentary of the same name. And when you see those Kansas sequences, you're like, well, yeah.
I see it now, yeah.
This is bleak as fuck.
That's Kansas for you. Right. No, I had another bit that I was just going to go right into after that. You know, have you seen this? G'day, cunts. How's it going? Pop a VB, grab a bunning snag, and don't get swooped by the Maggies, because we ain't here to fuck spiders. In this episode, old mate's gonna return to Oz, hey?
Blimey.
Crikey.
Oh, you mad cunt,
Yeah.
you legend.
You legend.
Yeah.
What movie are we talking about, Jen?
It is called The Wonderful Land of Oz. No, just kidding.
Okay.
I hope you didn't watch Wonderful Land of Oz instead. It was Return to Oz. Although I do want to talk a little bit about Wonderful Land of Oz.
Hey, how about Return to Sender with this movie, huh?
Oh,
Gotcha.
I don't know. I was thinking that there are other movies of this type from the era that I like better, but I do think this one is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I only had a memory of seeing it as a kid and being like, what the fuck is this? Like,
oh man, I never saw this as a kid, and it definitely would have scared the shit out of me because I was an oversensitive child.
right. Yeah, and I mean, already I had the same problem with this movie as a kid that people with childlike minds have with movies now, which I'm like, where are all the characters that I like? Why is suddenly Dorothy like a little kid when she was like an older teenager on coke to the gills? But you know,
Not her fault.
right?
but
Yeah. Look, it just, you know,
I'm sure we can
They
blame
are-
Victor Fleming and Louis B. Mayer and blah,
yeah,
blah, blah.
there's just diet pills, just so she could stay thin and work 18 hours. But like, you know, I remembered, you know, there's this precocious, you know, teen girl and like her musical theater buddies who have like this fun rollicking time, and everything's, you know, kind of like, you know, light and camp, and you know, it's fun, and it's, you know, it's Technicolor musical, and then we return to Oz, and it's like a bomb went off.
It really is.
Yeah, it's like all those characters that you liked before, like, yeah, they're basically dead. They aren't in this. Like the, you know, like the friendly scarecrow that you danced with, like, you know, he's gone. That the Tin Woodsman who had all this like pathos and heart, you know, the very sensitive, you know, but strong character. You're like, oh yeah, he got turned to stone. He's not going to be doing anything in this one. Coward.
The chicken shit lion.
Yeah, chicken shit lion. No. Like, hey, remember the fabulous, you know, wondrous, beautiful Emerald City? Yeah, it's fucking ruins now. How do you like that, kid?
Well, I'll say this. This movie came out in 1985, and it really is reflective of a different era for Disney, because this was released by the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah. Just
where
like
it's like,
everything
oh,
is now.
Well, it's like, let's not slavishly adhere to intellectual property, quote unquote. Let's make something different. When do they do that shit now?
Yeah, that was a huge mistake, and Disney vowed after that, like, nope, never doing that again.
Right, because this did not recoup its cost.
Instead, we're going to have a Disney Plus series on the backstory of the Ruby Slippers. We're going to learn about the mayor of Munchkin City and what he was like as a kid.
And it's also funny because as much as the 1939 Wizard of Oz is a beloved touchstone of American cinema, which it didn't start out as being, it was actually apparently quite overshadowed by the other huge movie from that year, Gone with the Wind. I don't think the original Wizard of Oz broke even for like 20 years, which is wild. As much as people love the original Wizard of Oz, it isn't that close to the source material. And in fact, Walter Murch, sole directing credit for him, because I think that the experience probably soured him on features.
Could be, yeah.
Walter Murch wanted to make something which very closely followed L. Frank Baum's books. And before we get started, I want to say if you're an Oz head or an L. Frank Baum-ite,
yeah.
I don't care. Save that shit for your web forums, because we don't give a shit. We're just going to talk about the movie we watched and our experiences with the Oz stuff. But I don't know a fuck of a lot about L. Frank Baum or Oz. Did you read the books too?
No, I'm unfortunately I'm not an Oz scholar either. I'd heard once about the characters in it being allegorical, and maybe that was relevant in U.S. history at the time, but fuck, I could not remember it. Sorry, kids.
Okay. Well, and the thing that gets me is how if you think about the Oz stories, what little I know of them, you realize how much L. Frank Baum repeated himself, because it's okay, well, we don't have the Tin Man in Return to Oz, but we have a metal man.
Right. he's made of brass. It's completely different kind of metal.
And we don't have the Scarecrow, but sometimes TikTok runs out of brains.
We have a kind of a jack-o'-lantern guy. That's
no Scarecrow, but there's Jack Pumpkinhead, and we don't have much of Toto, but hey, we got a chicken.
Yeah. We got a different friendly animal. Right.
Well, before we get too deep into the deadly desert or whatever the fuck,
oh yeah, Tim, yeah. Let's go to Oz. And by the way, the first place you see will absolutely kill you.
If you've ever wanted to combine Oz with Threads, here you go. Tim, how would you summarize the plot of this movie?
Oh, a rock monster eats an egg. Is killed by a chicken.
Thanks to Will Vinton Studios.
Right.
Did you know that?
I knew it from reading the credits.
There you go. Yeah, Will fucking Vinton. The heavy hitters on this are incredible. You got the Will Vinton claymation. You've got Brian Henson playing and performing, voicing and performing Jack Pumpkinhead.
Yeah.
Obviously, Walt Disney and all the resources of Elstree Studios. I think at the time, British cinema hadn't yet completely collapsed. But hey.
Yeah, but that claymation alone, I'm this does not look cheap.
No. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's really well done, and there is a lot of it. Thinking of, Ray Harryhausen, skeleton swinging swords, it's that's used sparingly to effect. But this is yes. Okay, you're gonna have a conversation with the rock monster. And it's this is are you just setting piles of money on fire, making this scene?
Yeah, it's really wild, and the visuals in this movie are arresting. But apart from Rock Eats Egg, what else is this movie about?
Well, like I said, it is about people being turned to stone. It is about being trapped in your own body. It is about decapitation. It is about becoming a monstrous caricature of life. And, these are all things that happen to, a 10-year-old girl.
Little Fairuza Balk.
Yeah.
I think her first feature.
Yeah, it did say introducing, so that would indicate.
Yep, and she's quite good. She's one of those child actors who has a naturalness that is that plays very well. And geez, and this poor girl is in peril like the entire time. It just obviously like a completely different feel from the original Wizard of Oz. And Tim, did you like the original? I actually did not see it until like I think my late 20s, like in its entirety.
I mean, I liked it well enough. I mean, I'm straight, so I like it as much as a straight guy likes the Wizard of Oz. But, I appreciate it for what it is. Like, people say I don't like musicals. They're wrong. I mean, Wizard of Oz is a good musical.
That's true.
Yeah.
And there was a conscious decision made to have this movie not be a musical, which is probably for the best.
Are there a lot of terrifying musicals out there?
I don't... that's a really good question. I don't think Phantom of the Opera counts.
Right, yeah. I mean, I guess, me as a musical theater expert, I should know, but...
Unless you're really scared of chandeliers.
I mean, I'm as scared of chandeliers as I think most people are.
But, like I said, Walter Murch wanted to make something close in spirit to the L. Frank Baum books, because the original Wizard of Oz is really like, it's colorful to take advantage of the Technicolor process. The silver slippers from the book become ruby slippers for that reason.
Play better on screen, yep.
Yeah, and it's very, it's bright and cheerful, and like, yes, there are scary things, like, kids were scared of Margaret Hamilton when she appeared on Sesame Street years later, so, that movie definitely had scares, but not to the degree this one did.
It's a different kind of scare. Like, it's the differences between, like, being scared of a witch versus, like, being scared of, like, going to prison.
Right, or, like, being trapped under a rock for 100 years.
Right, yeah, little things like that. Like, it isn't, like, spooky kind of scary. It's like, I don't know, the police are going to kick down your door kind of scary.
Yeah, it's like a whimsical Johnny got his gun.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, because the first one, like I said, it was more camp. It was more, like, arch, and it didn't seem as, like, grounded in actual terrifying things. And maybe that is something that, the original writer... was more tapped into in the same way that, like, how, like, fairy tales, like, as read are also, like, fucking terrifying?
Yes.
It's like, oh, this woman's going to capture you and then eat you and your sister.
Right.
Or, this wolf's going to devour you after, killing your grandma. Stuff like that. So maybe that is, how Oz is more tapped into that, and then the movie adaptation kind of veers away from that into more, lighthearted fare. But no, Return to Oz returns indeed right back to those original terrifying notions. Right. And this was an interesting era in children's entertainment where it actually got, like, super dark. And we're talking about, like, big budget, elaborate productions that really had the power to terrify kids. One example, they had some of the same personnel, including Gary Kurtz, who was, of course, a producer on Star Wars and was also a producer on Return to Oz. He also produced The Dark Crystal. Yeah. Which fucked me up when I was a kid. I was so scared of everything in The Dark Crystal. Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. I mean, those are... Those are peas in a pod. But yeah, Dark Crystal, you see the... The Gate. Yeah, The Gate. That's a good one. Less high fantasy than the previous two, I want to say. Yeah, like less notable and probably much lower budget, but still like it came out around the same time. It had featured children in peril, like mortal peril, and it's fucking like those little creatures that run around in the gate. Yeah, I'm still scared of those fucking things. Yeah, and like in the Dark Crystal, you get to see like some country schlub bumpkin get his soul sucked out, and then the protagonist's girlfriend dies at the end. And then the part that was the scariest thing in the world to me is when the Emperor just crumbles into dust. Right? Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, you see people just bodies crumbling. Yeah,
Ugh,
just a
so
yeah,
scary.
just a fun adventure tale for kids. I forget the actual timeline, but this does tonally seem consistent with like, Ralph Bakshi's Hobbit movies, because those are also pretty unnerving as well.
Well, Ralph Bakshi did Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit was that was Rankin Bass,
Right.
I think.
Which one am I?
But I mean, but that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like Rankin Bass, like is like, oh, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and like all these like cute stop motion specials, Rudolph's Shiny New Year, and all that bullshit. And then they do The Hobbit, which is all scary with like trolls and dragons and shit.
Yeah, that was.
So it's like everything was getting like more dark, and
Yeah, and this
I
is
don't know,
way
like-
before comics in the '90s got dark. So there, suck on that.
well, I feel like okay, like I've literally never thought on this topic before, so I'm gonna be freestyling.
Okay.
So correct me if I say anything stupid, but
Why start now?
like this was kind of the era when like a lot of kind of grown-ups had like they'd had their adolescent period and their wide-eyed innocence and stuff like that, and then we get into the 80s, and that's past the cynicism of the 70s. Like the 70s were like a cynical era, but then you had a return to the blockbuster. And big crowd-pleasing movies like Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. But then there was a turn towards kind of like more serious-minded fantasy, and I'm trying to think of like culturally like what that could have come out of. A couple of longtime friends, George Lucas and Gary Kurtz, were starting to... Their friendship was starting to crumble a little bit, and it had a lot to do with what was happening with Lucas, Skywalker Ranch, etc. Lucas was moving into like a more commercial era, like Industrial Light and Magic was growing. There was like hundreds of staff. Like the movies were getting bigger.
You sell out George Lucas.
Yeah, and like Kurtz was like, hey, like what happened to like all our youthful ideals of, making really interesting artistic statements? And I kind of like to move a little more towards that, which is why he did like a really like off the wall project like Dark Crystal with Jim Henson.
Yeah, and I'll go you.
That movie gets boxed into like kids entertainment, but like you watch it and you're like, this is like really serious, and like fizz gig aside.
Right, yeah. It is. Yeah, it isn't. It isn't childish, despite being for kids.
Yeah, nominally for children.
Yeah, and the other things too. Never-ending Story. Like that. That's contemporary.
Right, I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Never-ending Story is a really good example, because like
It's only about the end of the world.
Right. Like everybody, and everybody talks about the scene with the horse.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another childhood trauma for you.
But I remember my best friend talking about a scene toward the end, because this is one of her favorite movies of all time. The scene where there's the big rock guy, and he's sitting there talking about how like he tried to hold on to his friends and things around him, but he's like, I just couldn't hold on to them.
Yeah.
And she said she was just like crying watching the scene because it's so sad. It's like, yeah, like the world has ended, like his universe has crumbled, and his friends died in front of him.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's in a fucking kids movie.
Yeah.
I think that, and it does make me wonder if, some
all beloved childhood movies.
Yeah, and like some of these like great fantasists of our time, for whatever reason, were making these movies that were darker and more cynical. But it's hard to say because like Henson definitely always had like a like he could definitely do dark humor when he wanted to. Like as much as the Muppets were like, oh, it's for families, but like some of those like early ads he made where it's like a character will just straight up fucking shoot another character.
Look, I don't. Why are you so bothered by shooting someone with a cannon, Jen?
Just like shoot, like, oh, like you don't drink this coffee, I'm gonna shoot you in the fucking face. And it's like, this is for TV.
Yeah.
Or like
I can't believe Kermit murdered someone early in his career and they just swept it under the rug.
well, that guy's Teflon.
Yeah.
Like,
You can't touch Kermit.
yeah, exactly. Unless you're Piggy.
Yeah.
There was this move in the 80s toward like, fuck it. Like, we're going to do like really fucked up, dark shit. And it wasn't because everybody was like getting more cynical. Cause like I was reading, I was doing, research for this and, reading through biographies of George Lucas and like other, players from the time. And one of the books I read pointed out like how different in tone, Temple of Doom is from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's a good example, yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, Raiders of the Lost Ark is like, hey, it's like rip-roaring adventure. And, it's like there's
adventure.
danger, but it's like, it's exhilarating. Like, it's the worst enemy you can think of. It's like fucking Nazis. And,
Yeah, I'm going
to
punch this Nazi in the face and we'll win.
Yeah, but it's like, damn, that like, it feels really good to see all those Nazis melt at the end.
Yeah.
But... this bio is making the point that like Temple of Doom is like a lot cruder and meaner in tone in a way. Like, the violence is more explicit. Like you have like Indiana Jones like slugging a little kid.
Yeah, we're going to watch this guy get his heart ripped out.
Yeah. I don't know. Was it because all these guys were getting divorced?
Maybe. I don't. Hey, blame trickle down economics. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was the era of Reagan, so everybody was turning into a huge dick.
Right.
So, yeah, like I don't know. Maybe smarter people can figure it out.
I can't say why. I only lived through it.
Well, we're too immersed in it.
Yeah.
But, so with Return to Oz, it's like this, you have this dark take on Oz where, at the end of Wizard of Oz, like Dorothy has to say goodbye to all of her friends, sadly, but she's so happy to be home, right? And then in the opening of Wisconsin Death Trip, Return to Oz.
Yeah, same.
You realize that Dorothy is being considered like seriously psychologically disturbed.
Right, yeah, sort of like the, I don't know, Alan Moore reinterpretation of like, whatever Charlton classic characters, where it's like, what if Dorothy was actually just mentally disturbed? Let's take that.
Right. Well, I don't think we could legally watch a movie made out of Lost Girls.
Probably not.
Like, I don't think. Yeah. Like.
Yeah. But yeah, it does fit more with that. Like, it's like, oh, it's the difference of like being scared by a witch versus the difference of being scared of being like, having your like hands and mouth duct tape and being thrown in the back of a van.
Right, because like we start off with scenes in Kansas. Dorothy can't sleep, and her Auntie M wants to take her to a quack doctor.
Yeah,
who's going to give her electroshock therapy.
Yeah. The first one's like, Dorothy's just like bawling tears because the mean old lady's gonna take her dog away, and the second one is we're gonna give electroshock therapy to a little girl.
Yeah, and I have to hand it to Murch and his entire crew, because like they are unrelenting, like through the entire first part of this movie, and making everything look as bleak and terrifying as possible.
Yeah, like if you read this as like a horror movie, you're probably more on board with it because, of the other movies that we've reviewed, like Fight Club or Jacob's Ladder or In the Mouth of Madness. These are all movies where our protagonist is crazy. Like they're talking about imaginary things, and everyone around them is like, this guy's got a problem.
Yeah, and maybe in 1939 you could kind of laugh off Dorothy saying, "And you were there, and you were there."
Like, oh, she's got a bump on the noggin.
Yeah, but in 1985, it's like, like she's nuts.
Right? Yeah.
Like she keeps insisting that she talked to this fucking line.
Yeah, and she's like, let me tell you more about Oz, this place I went to, Oz, this one that, there isn't any evidence for and no one's ever been there, but I'm going to keep talking about it. It's like, you are so autistic.
Which, by the way, is like so much more appealing than fucking Kansas.
Well, yeah. I think that might be the subtext of the first one. Be like, wow, a place where there's like color and interesting people and like a city.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And, you know, it's explicit in the original movie. It's like, yeah, okay, Kansas is black and white. Oz is glorious Technicolor. Oz is better than Kansas.
A little kid going to the big city.
Well, at least she doesn't live in Nebraska.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Dorothy is psychologically disturbed. Also more vulnerable because like this is a younger Dorothy.
Yeah, this is an actual child.
Yeah, and it should be emphasized that it was the 1939 Wizard of Oz which aged up its Dorothy. I mean, this was for Judy Garland and she was what, like 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, they bound her chest just like they did to Princess Leia. They taped those puppies down and they said, "Okay, sing."
Just like they threw a vest on Jennifer Connelly.
Connelly.
It's like, oh man, like we've got enough bulges in this movie already.
Yeah, that is too contoured.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop like everybody from having a crush on Jennifer Connelly in that movie as a kid.
How could you not? Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
You had to wait for the craft to wake up to Fairuza Balk, but
yes, yes. Fairuza grew up very nicely, but
she did.
Yeah, she's like a more vulnerable character in this movie.
Yeah,
and
she's a child subject to the whims of fucking Victorian medicine. Like, if that isn't terrifying enough.
Right. And it's also funny how, there were certain things in this movie which were, like, so scary as a kid. Which is like, the Wheelers and, like, Mombi's heads. As an adult, you know, watching a child get strapped down to a gurney by Nicol Williamson and Jean Marsh. And having electrodes put on your head, you're like, no.
Look, we're just gonna scramble your child brain real quickly, and then everything will be okay because you won't have a personality. It'll be, you know, Rose Kennedy over the rainbow.
That was Rosemary Kennedy.
We're friends. I don't use the Marie. You know.
Oh, hey, like in the sequel to this, Dorothy goes back to Oz again, but it's been taken over by Donald Ewan Cameron, and he uses psychic driving on her.
She goes back again, and she meets Joni Mitchell, and they paved over Oz and put up a parking lot.
MK Ultra and Oz. But, yeah, so child in peril, but she is helped by another child who... It turns out to be Ozma.
Just shows
later.
up, yeah. It's Dorothy and her imaginary friend Tyler Durden just breaking out of the Victorian mental hospital.
Right, and Dorothy does draw like from her own life for her Oz fantasies. If they are fantasies, who knows? Because Nicol Williamson, the sinister doctor. Is also the Gnome King, and Jean Marsh, of course, is Mombi, prefiguring Bavmorda and Willow a few years later.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And when she does get to Oz, it's like there's something really wrong. Like, this whole movie is like, there's something really wrong here.
Yeah, it's like when you're playing Existenz, and you're like, why are all these themes of decay and mistrust everywhere?
Yeah.
You know, minor Cronenberg outing.
And in fact, she had to leave Toto at home, which is probably good because he probably would have been caught by the dog catcher and gassed if he'd come along.
Yeah. Just like separated from her dog just at the outset, be like, no fun, no comfort. Yeah, no escape.
But fortunately, she meets up with her chicken, Belina, who has been failing to lay an egg. Which also makes you feel bad at the beginning of the movie when that's mentioned, because you know what happens to chickens that can't produce.
Yeah, they get invited to dinner.
And but this is a talking chicken, at least in Oz.
Yeah, It may have been a talking chicken back in Kansas. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it just talked really quietly.
Yeah, it just kind of mumbles to itself.
Yeah. Dorothy's nuts. She says the chickens are whispering. But that's what starts Dorothy's journey to figure out, like, what the fuck happened to Oz? Like, why is it this blasted hellscape where all the people in the Emerald City have been turned to stone?
Yeah, it's like I go away for negative 35 years, age minus, 7 or 8, and I come back here, and now everything's gone to shit. What the hell?
Well, she does reunite with her friends in a way. Tin Man, Cowardly Lion, Scarecrow. But they've been turned into stone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, all those beloved characters from before. It has the same problem going in as Alien 3. Like, remember how, just by the skin of their teeth, Ripley barely escapes with her, sort of adopted daughter Newt, who drowns in her cryotube, and the android who she learns to trust again, who is impaled by by an I-beam, or her buddy, her brother in arms, Hicks, who burns to death or some shit in its sleep. Just like, that's fun. That's a great start. Thank you, movie.
Yeah, so, if you wanted to see a reprise of We're Off to See the Wizard, like, you're not going to see it. Everybody's a big rock now.
Yeah. So already, that's another huge downer at the outset of this movie.
I do like that, and I know that the tone might be kind of a hard sell for people, especially if you're, like, all in on the original, but I don't
think
know.
that's my
it's
main
like
issue with it.
Right, but it's kind of like, okay, well, why not have, like, a dark twist on something? And it's not
it has been 45 years.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why, like, some like, maybe at this point we're just, like, saturated with, like, returns to things. And it's because Lord knows, like, I'm not paying attention to any of the Star Wars media that's coming out. Like, that ship sailed for me a long time ago.
Right.
So it might be a case of, like, just, like, saturation, but this movie, which was I think brought into production because it's like, oh shit, we got to use the option on this L. Frank Baum shit before it goes into the public domain, which is the most Disney shit ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm actually astonished that it did eventually go into the public domain, because Disney is currently making sure that absolutely nothing that anyone has even breathed in a Disney property is not 100% copyright Disney.
Yeah, it's the end of culture, basically.
Right. So maybe it's just because this hadn't become, like, well-trodden ground by this point, where it's like, oh, okay, we're going to do a dark take on, like, an old property, and isn't going to, like, but
that wasn't even hack at the time. This was just jarring.
No. Yeah. It's like dark fairy tales were kind of less of a thing. It's like, Company of Wolves had just come out.
Yeah, if you wanted dark, you'd have to, read heavy metal.
Yeah, which was for grown-ups.
Right, yeah. It's too intense.
Maybe it's also because I'm not, like, a huge Wizard of Oz fan. Like, I don't have anything against the Wizard of Oz or the L. Frank Baum stuff. I did read some of the books as a kid, but they kind of start being the same after a while.
I mean, I'm more of a C.S. Lewis head myself, but,
I read those. They were fine. I think my jam was really Redwall and those Tamara Pierce books about the chick who had purple eyes and did magic, and she was a knight, even though she was a girl.
What? That is a fantasy.
Yeah, those were really fun. This must have been, like, really wild at the time, because, it didn't really go over with the public. But, hey, okay, so Oz is now a blighted hellscape. Let's see where this goes. And sure enough, Dorothy starts to figure out who's responsible. She meets Mombi, who is fucking scary.
Yeah. I mean, well, a single woman who lives by herself. Yes, already that's pretty terrifying.
I mean, you can see why she started collecting heads.
Yeah.
She's racked up a lot of bodies, if you know what I mean.
Well, she needs a newer, younger face because she's, going to hit the wall.
Right. And interestingly, one of the alternate Mombies is the chick from Young Sherlock Holmes.
Ah.
But she takes that head off and puts a different one on.
That's a shame. Yeah, just easiest change in your mind. Putting on a different face.
Yep. And that is like, even as an adult watching it, I'm like, these scenes are hella scary. And it has a lot to do with, I think, and this was another one of our movies which was a troubled production because the budget started going up, and this was a first feature for Walter Murch. So he actually got fired at one point. And the only reason why he was able to finish the movie was because he had some pretty heavy-hitting friends. And Piper Laurie, who played Aunt Em in the movie, actually tells this story. She went to the set, and there were 3 guys sitting there, George, Francis, and Stephen. Lucas, Coppola, and Spielberg had come overseas to shore up their friend Walter, because they knew him from USC, to be like, hey, you know what? Like, we think you can pull through it, my guy. Like, we're backing you up here. So Disney actually like laid off of Murch and let him come back and finish the film.
So that's all it took was 3 giants of the industry.
Can you imagine like having like 3 friends like that who just be like, nah, you're gonna let our friend finish his movie if you know what's good for you?
No, I went to UCLA. Of course I can't imagine that.
Well, hey, they had that Howard the Duck poster hanging up at Melnitz.
Yeah, they sure did.
That's a Lucasfilm. It was so funny. They didn't even like try to like shove it in a corner. It was just like right in the middle there.
It's like, yeah, we know about Howard the Duck.
Like, as you walked in, like if you were going to the Bridges Theater and, you buy your ticket at the box office and you walk in, or if you're a student and you're going to like the edit rooms or whatever, like there it is, Howard the fucking Duck.
Yeah, hey, they're just big, Leah Thompson fans.
Well, hey, who isn't?
Hey, yeah. Hey.
Well, fuck a duck.
She sure did.
Phew. Anyway, but enough about that bomb. More about this bomb.
Right.
It's really hard to pick out what the issue was on the set. Like there's, it's like, oh, well, it was, the production was taking a long time and, they were spending more money. And the money is all there on the screen.
That's true, yeah.
And I think, the bean counters probably don't think it was worth it, but hey, it looks great. Like, this is great production design, great effects, great costumes, great everything. But the production schedule is a little more of a problem because if you're not getting everything done that you need to get done, then it's like, hey, we got a release date. Like, where's your movie? And this could have had something to do with like Murch's inexperience as a feature director. He really made his name as an editor and also a sound guy. And apparently he's also into like physics and stuff like that. He seems like super smart and is really respected as an editor. Like he worked on Godfather 1 and 2, like THX 1138, Apocalypse Now, like all these really great films. But like looking at interviews with him, he does seem like more of like a cerebral guy and maybe less of a guy who is like I had seen it said that, oh, hey, like, maybe somebody who had been better at working with actors would have been good, but it's not like a Lucas situation where you're like, wow, I can really tell this guy does not want to talk to people at all because these performances really show it. Yeah. It's like the performances in this are great.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe a lot of that comes from like the Henson people, like the performers.
Yeah, because it is a very like puppet and animatronic heavy performance or ensemble, I want to say. I mean, 3 of the characters you see most aren't even people.
Right, yeah. And that's not even real chicken in some shots.
I know, although I'd be hard-pressed to tell.
I was tickled when I was reading about, I was reading some articles about the production of this movie, and they had like 40 different chickens
to
stand in for Bellina. And every chicken had like a label on its cage of like what it would do, like sit and stay, run to camera, like, stuff like that. Like the single task that a chicken can be relied on to do, because you can't really teach a chicken multiple things. And apparently for Murch, it was really important that these chickens be like accurate to the period. So he actually went to a person who bred like historical chicken breeds.
Okay.
Like, what would a girl in like the 1900s in Kansas have as a pet?
Yeah.
And it would be this kind of chicken.
Yeah, give me the good kind of chicken. Give me the real 1898 chicken.
Oh, and they also had to have extra small chickens that Firuza Balk could carry because she was little and had little arms, and she couldn't carry the regular sized chicken.
Yeah.
Which is adorable.
Mm-hmm.
But
but there's something that is even a little more upsetting about the age of Dorothy in this, because there's a point where it's like, if you're like a teen or a tween, it's like, yeah, you're a young adult and you kind of have some agency. But there's something about this where it's like, just like if you're a kid that young, it's like the kind of ways and means of your life are well out of your hands. You know, it's like you can kind of dress yourself, and like, you know, you'll know to like ask for food if you're hungry.
Right.
But like, what is a kid that age, like what agency do they have?
Well, and that might have a lot to do with like why Oz exists. I mean, like possibly in Dorothy's head, because, you know, as a child you have no agency, but you can go to this magical land and you are like admired and feared. Like everyone's like, oh, Dorothy Gale, like she killed the Wicked Witch of the East or whatever. It's I mean, but that's the role that fantasy serves for people, is like, here's a place, you know, it's a place where I can go and be like the coolest guy ever. What do you think, Chair?
Oh, I got nothing good to say about this.
The Chair would talk in Oz, I bet.
Yeah, it would be some just horrible amalgam of like, you know, some, you know, like an accountant's soul was like ripped from his body when he was turned to stone, and then he was cast into this, and then he just been staring at the wall for 100 years, and then
and that was a thread. Like that was a thread that I dropped when I went into my little cul-de-sac about Walter Murch and the production of this movie. Like as a director, like obviously his sense of pacing is just going to be like spot on. And the way that he establishes mood, like, you know, with the help of all the people in the crew, like making these incredible sets, and, you know, the director of photography, who I think was originally Freddie Francis, but he was shit canned due to, I think, disagreements with Walter Murch. I think
like, I want
it was
you
like,
to feel depressed, like in your soul, watching this movie.
Well, what I had seen was that Freddie Francis like, dude, like, what are we doing? Like, we got to get this done. And, you know, Murch being like very detail oriented was taking a little longer than he wanted. So they got David Watkins, who actually was the DP on Help, starring the Beatles, which I found very interesting. You know, great. The photography is great. Like everything having to do with the mood and kind of like the pacing of these scenes is just like fantastic. And this episode might be us like kind of like previewing spooky season, because we are going to be getting into October. Because, you know, as Tim said, like you can absolutely view this as a horror film.
Yes.
Like, and a lot of the scenes are paced like horror scenes.
Yeah, it is going from like one tragedy to meet another monstrosity to barely escape a horrible death. Yeah,
like, everyone in the Emerald City has turned to stone. Oh God, here they come the Wheelers.
Yeah, this fantastical city is in ruins. Everyone you know is basically dead. You're set upon by savages, and now you're trapped with a mechanical man, a grotesque mockery of life. And then you'll meet
who's proud of his lifelessness.
Right, yes, he's proud that he has no soul, or, you know, something like that. And then you go to meet another guy after you meet the decapitated woman, who has a gallery of heads, which means I guess there are 30 other dead women because of her. Okay, we'll just take that as a note and then continue along in this story with a child going on an adventure without, any kind of guardian. And then you go to meet a scarecrow whose body has been rent asunder and yet he lives. Another mockery of life. That's this, sort of grotesque version of the human form. And yeah, then together they assemble a literal monstrosity and fly to escape the princess, who, by the way, is chasing this little girl around as a headless shrieking woman. So you've got all the fun, lighthearted adventure of Sleepy Hollow going into like the first third of Return to Oz.
Yeah, you can see why this movie really only hit with certain children, like the weird children.
Yeah, the ones who grew up watching The Craft, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certain kids, I'm sure, absolutely love this movie. Other kids were probably terrified.
Right. Yeah, because it is a terrifying movie. I mean, you're only like a golden arm away from, from Princess Mombi, chasing Dorothy around without a head on.
Yeah. And by the way, she takes a look at Dorothy and is like, you'd be nice to wear eventually. Let me lock you in the tower.
Right, yeah. I'm going to kidnap, imprison, and then behead you, child. Like, that's just another fun story in this just cavalcade of horror.
Yeah. And, honestly, sexualizing a child.
Oh, I know, but
she's like, hey, you're gonna grow up nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep you.
You're gonna grow up into
you're gonna fuck Edward Norton in American History
There we
X.
go. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hope that Furzo was treated better than Sarah Polley was on Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
I know, right?
Or Judy Garland, for that matter.
Yeah. That's where the real horror is. If they had done like a sequel to Oz, it was just like about the behind the scenes of the making of, where you just got like this coked up teen girl.
Well, have you seen like any of that stuff about like Sarah Polley and like Terry Gilliam?
No.
Where she basically went back to him. She wrote him a letter years later that was like, hey, like I was really severely traumatized while making Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Mm-hmm. And
he was like, whoa, damn, like I didn't notice. Yeah, obviously.
It's like, I'm Terry Gilliam. You're trying to describe what is this trauma? Like, I bathe in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how I don't understand what you mean with this word. Is this not the normal way a child grows up? No.
Well, knowing Terry Gilliam of late, he's probably like, trauma's for snowflakes. Get over it.
Could be. I don't know. The guy makes some weird movies.
Then he made Tideland.
Yeah. Also, Ozma, who we've never really met or been introduced to, she's kept prisoner as a ghost here.
Oh yeah, she's just like a shade wandering around.
Yeah, we're fully like into like Lord of the Rings, like ring wraith territory at this point. Just like, what is going on? Like,
oh, and this is a funny thing, and a thing that I only know from watching a very terrible Oz movie called Wonderful Land of Oz. Many times as a riff tracks.
Well, yeah, you'd have to.
Wonderful Land of Oz shares a lot of the same elements as this movie because it was drawn from some of the same sources, and I can't keep any of the Oz books straight, so don't.
Fascist drum majorette characters.
Oh, General Ginger. Maybe one of my favorite characters.
Such a lunatic.
Not just in a riff tracks, but maybe of all time.
Well, because she resonates with you like on a deeply personal level.
Oh, yeah. She has powerful only child energy.
Right, yeah. She's like, I want to be in charge. I don't want to do any work. Just make things happen.
She has tons of sandwiches.
Right, yeah.
Like, yeah. She's, like, I love her. But, yeah, so that's General Ginger from Wonderful Land of Oz. But commonalities between that film and Return to Oz. The Ozma thing, obviously, because in the two movies, like, Ozma is eventually restored to the throne as the
Galadriel.
rightful... No, she diminishes and goes into the West and becomes Galadriel.
Right.
And remains Galadriel. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
It's been a while since I saw those movies. So Ozma is restored to the throne, like with the help of her friends. Some of which are in these two movies. But in Return to Oz, Jack Pumpkinhead asked Dorothy if he can call her mom in lieu of his real mom, who is Ozma. And, that's canonical, apparently. But because in this movie, I think because they just didn't want to go into the whole ass backstory of Ozma's childhood and the creation of Jack Pumpkinhead, like, they just kind of gloss over it. And they inadvertently end up being really progressive because he's like, oh, I was created by my mom, Ozma. Thus, correctly gendering Ozma.
Okay.
Because if you'll recall in Wonderful Land of Oz, Jack Pumpkinhead is created by an apparent boy named Tip. But it turns out at the end that the evil witch Mombi was charged with the care of a child, Ozma, the rightful heir to the throne of Oz.
It's for the man in the iron mask here.
But, for whatever reason, because she's a bitch or whatever, she wanted to conceal Ozma, so she turned her into a boy. So there's this weird trans narrative in Wonderful Land of Oz. And at the end of the movie, Tip, the boy, is transformed into
his original
Ozma.
Gender,
yeah. Ozma, she is like, her, she can present as the gender that maybe she always knew that she was. So, strangely, like, Return to Oz completely by accident ends up sounding like really progressive because Ozma was never Tip. Ozma was always Ozma.
Right.
Ozma was always a fucking girl. Like, even if you called her Tip and dressed her as a boy and raised her as a boy, she's still Ozma.
Right, yeah. Now let's discuss the gender dynamics of Mr. B Natural.
Yes, let's.
I'll put one in the swear jar for that.
So yeah, that's kind of funny, but definitely I wanted to something that I wanted to bring up. Also, like, can I just say how thankful I am that the fucking Wogglebug isn't in Return to Oz? Because fuck that guy.
I think that might have been a bit too much. This movie would have had an R rating if the Wogglebug was in this.
He probably would have been like a real bug. Like, he would have been like the Gartham in Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
Like an actual bug.
It would have been, it would have gone, like, much further into, like, we would have been in, like, Cronenberg territory at this point, where it's like, oh, yeah, one of the protagonists in this is a humanoid insect.
Yeah,
like, we're just going to play it that way. It's okay.
Fucking hate the Wogglebug.
So then they narrowly escape from the headless woman. They fly across the desert that we've seen it reduce people to sand. Basically,
yeah, and we see one of the Wheelers die.
Yeah, or a couple of them,
like by touching the desert. Oh, by the way, if people don't know this about the Wheelers, but if theater kids don't attend one Ren Fair or Game of Mafia per year, they will turn into Wheelers.
I thought that's how they turned into Wheelers, but I mean, either way, it's bad news for the rest of us.
Yeah, and that is why the Wheelers are so terrifying and repulsive. Yeah, because they're all theater.
They have
kids.
Strong theater kid energy. It's true, and that's probably the most horrifying thing about this movie. So they go across the desert, and then they end up on the Lonely Mountain. No,
it's the gnome. It's where the Gnome King.
Yeah,
lives.
they go to the court of the Crimson King, and he just plays dumb. It's like, oh hey, yeah. Right, so yeah, then they all get trapped underground, and the Goblin King makes his case in that it's like, I'm made of stone. Of course, all stones, gems, and minerals are within my domain. So that's why he took all the emeralds from Emerald City. Right,
which is appears to be like kind of just like a possession thing, and I have seen like scholars who are into this sort of thing have described the Gnome King as basically representing like rapacious capitalism.
The Gnome King, my mistake. Yes.
Yeah, like he's just like, hey,
it's eminent domain.
I want it. It's mine. Yeah, like I'm gonna, like, I don't care if these are all in the Emerald City. Like, I'm just gonna take them. And he's also, like, really anti-Minecraft because he doesn't like anybody digging.
Right. Well, he proclaims, domain over all stones and minerals. He retains the mineral rights, I guess. He's sort of the J. Paul Getty of this of Oz.
But it's weird because, like, yeah, he's into, like, minerals and, like, geology and shit, but he's also into knickknacks. Yeah,
well, I mean,
like, he lives in a home goods. He's the home king,
right? And he does also, it's fitting. He proclaims, domain over the ruby slippers. I mean, rubies, those are gems. Ergo, it must belong to him.
I do like that reveal where he's like, hell yeah, I'm wearing them. You like?
He's fabulous.
I went to DSW.
Yeah.
I got the loyalty program. I got $5 off on my birthday.
Do the ruby slippers have like that red, whatever, the sole underneath? Is that Ferragamo or something?
Are they Louboutins, do you mean? Walk a mile in these Louboutins.
Louboutin?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
That's a good question. We never see the soles of the ruby
slippers.
I'm
sure they would now. They would, that's how they would reimagine them on some shit tier Disney Plus series.
Oh yeah, because then you could get the tie-in with Christian Louboutin, and like Disney adults with like way too goddamn much money would pay like
for a pair of shoes.
Oh, they pay like $1,000 for like Louboutin like ruby slippers easily.
Yeah, there you go.
They'd have them in a case at Disneyland, like on Main Street, in one of those little shops.
Right. Yeah.
Where you can go buy like arty Disney tchotchkes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's this sculpture of fucking Pete's dragon made out of bronze or some shit.
I don't know. Maybe they would be, Chucks or something, and she'd be, snapping her gum at you and listening to her Zune.
I would love to have red sequin Chucks.
Well, there. You're a fucking Disney mark now.
I'm gonna go to Etsy after this.
Okay.
I'm gonna support independent artists. But yeah. So the Gnome King, as well as being a hoarder, also likes to play mind games and kind of cruelly dangle the opportunity for freedom.
Yeah,
like in front of his captives.
And also, he's a bit of a fan of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Because he's got, a room full of knickknacks, and it's like, hey, if you touch the right knickknack, you win, and if you don't, you die.
Oh, okay. Because I haven't seen Last Crusade since, like, 1992.
I mean, you at least remember the broad strokes of it. It's an iconic movie.
Generally.
Okay.
Well, that's why you're here, Tim. You're filling in my many, many gaps. Right. But yeah, so you have to pick the right tchotchke and say Oz, and if you're right, you're all free. But
and if you don't, you get turned into a tchotchke, and you get to live the rest of your life as a knickknack, as an ashtray.
Yeah, you get to be like a cookie jar in a Ross dress for less for the rest of your life.
Again, a horrifying movie.
Yeah. So everybody guesses wrong, of course, because eventually it's going to be up to Dorothy to find her friends.
But not immediately, because before that, the Gnome King is like, yeah, I got these ruby slippers. You can put them on and just fuck off. Like, you can just forget your friends. You can just go home and forget all this.
But Dorothy would never do that. She's too good-hearted.
Right. But it is, I mean, I can't think of where else I've seen that. I'm sure I will after the episode's been posted. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, just, fuck your friends. Take off. Save yourself.
And that is like a nice character moment because it does reveal something about Dorothy. And I think one of the reasons why this isn't like one of my absolute stone favorites of this era of dark fantasy, like has a lot to do with the source material. The fact that Dorothy just isn't that interesting as a character. Like, she's a nice kid, and that's about it.
Right.
Now, you compare that to Labyrinth, which to me is so much more interesting because Sarah, Jennifer Connelly's character, starts off as just like
she's a selfish teenager. Yeah.
She's a little brat.
Right,
like, and you kind of understand where she's coming from because it's like, she's
theater kid, so.
Oh, yeah, because she's like in the park, like LARPing.
Oh, I know.
It starts raining.
Awful. I would not even have fingered her when I was 14.
A nice kid. But no, she's like you get it.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tim.
She's she's a brat. She doesn't get along with her stepmom. She doesn't want to watch her little brother, so she kind of says something cruel in a glib way that leads to like horrible consequences. And in her journey through the labyrinth, she learns some things. And that movie, to me, like, is a really wonderful example of kind of like a coming of age story for a teenage girl, like told in the fantasy milieu, because it isn't just like kind of a hero's journey, but a lot of it has to do with kind of the terror of being like an adolescent girl and like becoming aware of sexuality, David Bowie's pants, and how scary that is.
Well, scary but arousing.
Right. So you're still a child, but you're kind of making these first tentative steps into adulthood. And that can be really frightening. And the world is a frightening place. Like even this kind of like magical fantasy world of like, friendly monsters and like talking foxes. So that makes the movie really rich. Like Return to Oz less so because it's more like, it's
so
you
much
mentioned
more dire.
Yeah, but it's not like thematically it doesn't feel as rich, even though like, there are elements there. Like, at the beginning of the movie, like not only is Dorothy like kind of suffering psychologically in like this bleak landscape, like her uncle is apparently like traumatically injured. Like Aunt Em says like, that leg's healed, but he's still not able to work.
Right.
And like Dorothy's not able to work, so it's like, she can't fucking sleep. So, obviously she's not coping well.
Childhood anxiety.
Yeah, and so like there's that sense at the beginning of like terror and precarity. Like even the chicken like can't lay an egg. It's this terror of like, shit, what's going to happen if we don't figure something out?
Yeah, it isn't just being poor, it's being destitute.
Right. And so that's like kind of interesting. And also like I guess there are elements in the movie of like these kind of like, certainly like these kind of primal fears. I don't know, it just doesn't feel as like well-rounded as something like Labyrinth, maybe because like the characters are like pretty flat.
I don't know. I think that it has such a jarring departure from the original Wizard of Oz that you're dealing with palpable, terrorizing fears when presented to a much younger child versus,
right.
I mean, even Labyrinth, like, yes, Jennifer Connelly's character does, undergo an arc, but still she's like a teenager. She has, some sense of self, and the problems there are still kind of, campy, where it's like, oh, I'll deal with these, singing fox creatures by pulling their heads off and kicking them.
Oh, these fucking birds dancing at me or whatever.
Yeah, these like bird fox things. And still, it's like, it's like the Bog of Eternal Stench. Like, oh, you'll smell bad forever versus like, or you'll be turned into a statue and decapitated. Like that's one of those things I think is a more legitimate fear.
Prince of the Land of Stench.
Yeah, stuff like that. So even Labyrinth, despite being darker, does still feel more, arch camp fantasy, whereas, Return to Oz is more like, kid, if you don't get your shit together, we're going to fry your brain in a Victorian madhouse.
Well, I guess because it's like, maybe it's kind of like a horror movie where it's like the scares are good, but it's not necessarily like about something. Like a lot of the really great horror films of that era had like, like a subtext. Right,
yeah.
To
yeah,
them,
I guess.
Where it was like, the one that I keep bringing up is like Nightmare on Elm Street is how adults absolutely will fucking fail you at every turn.
Right, yeah. It's parents don't understand the psychological trauma that you're going through.
Right, which, there are elements of that in this movie. I mean, like, and you know, Aunt Em is maybe making like a hasty decision by taking Dorothy to get electroshock, but she's at her wit's end. Like, she doesn't know what else to do. And hey, doctors know what they're doing, right?
Look, it's almost the end of the 19th century. How much further can medical science progress than it has?
Also, the electric machine has a face on it.
Yeah, look, it's got electricity. What else do you want? We haven't unlocked the magic of the atom yet. This is as good as we're going to get.
Shit, that's so funny that you said that, because I literally just thought, what happens to Oz when they split the atom?
That's another question worth asking. Let's return to Oz.
Well, that brings us back around to Threads.
Right. I guess to ask your own question again, Jen, would be, if you don't think Oz, Return to Oz is about anything, how would you describe it? If someone asked you, what is Return to Oz about?
I mean, I guess on the one level, it's simply, well, it isn't just that it's a dark reimagining of Oz. It's closer to the L. Frank Baum source material. It's more like Oz for a more cynical time.
Okay.
Maybe it's like Oz for adults, in a way, or at least yeah,
I mean, you would have been an adult by that point if you'd grown up with The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, and because I remember, as a small child, I really loved the Pippi Longstocking stories. I liked the movies and I read the books a bunch of times. And you notice how when you're a kid, as you get older, there's always that period of cool teen cynicism that you go through, because you're kind of leaving your childhood identity behind and groping towards adulthood. Or as a kid, it's Pippi Longstocking, she lives alone in a house and she's got a horse and she's the strongest girl in the world. And then as a teen, I was like, those books are that's so stupid. That doesn't even make sense. That would never happen.
Yeah, how can one girl own a horse? Come on.
But it's a little bit of a, it's a very teenage thing to do, because it's you think you're smart and you have it figured out and that you're too cool for school. But then as an adult, you come back around to understanding the value of these stories.
Right, yeah. They're simple fantasy as a means to explain a more complex topic.
Right, and it's Pippi Longstocking is the strongest fucking girl in the world. If she wants to pick up a whole goddamn horse, she can do it.
Yeah. It's a simple character with one defining trait that you use as a
well, I think it's important that Pippi
paragon,
has,
I guess.
Yeah, because it's important that Pippi Longstocking has two normal kid friends, Tommy and Annika.
Right, yeah,
because they're a little bit of audience surrogates to be damn, wouldn't you love to be friends with Pippi Longstocking? Because she can kick your bullies' asses and she'll take you to the South Seas and shit. You meet pirates. That's so cool.
Yeah. Oh my god, I hear she's a total bitch, though. She's talking about you behind your back, though.
Oh,
yeah.
Damn it, those teens again.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, there's a simple method of saying, look, if you had this ability, how would you then interact with the world? I think what you're saying is that we don't get as much precociousness from Dorothy, because, again, the problem that I have about this movie, about this horror movie that we watch, is that it has too many real immediate kind of unsettling ideas behind it that are presented to someone who I think is way too young to be exposed to them.
Yeah, and maybe the essential the character of Dorothy is essentially a sunny one and an optimistic one.
Yeah.
And maybe you kind of need that in a setting like that. Because imagine if she was a fragile child who just
broke down
when confronted by these things. It would be too hard to watch.
Yeah, but
a child being tortured, basically.
Yeah, and even if you take Dorothy to have a sunny, optimistic point of view, and she is a protagonist in this. She affects change. She gets things done. But despite all that, you still, and maybe this is just me or the movie establishing mood so effectively, but you're you do realize at the end of this, you're going to get electroshock therapy again, no matter how successful, that sort of electrified sword of Damocles is like hanging over all these proceedings. Like even at the end of it, when she's successful, when she, beats the two villains and, reinstates the, the Scarecrow as the king, and we've got TikTok all polished up, and they have a parade, and the lion's back, and all her friends are there. It's still like, well, I got to go back. I think I might be a vegetable afterwards. You guys have fun. I wish I could stay.
But they throw us a bone because the creepy asylum or whatever the doctor was operating out of was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. And not only that, he ran back in to try to get his equipment and is ostensibly dead.
All right, so a bunch of mental patients died and doctors.
Yeah. So,
but they would have had to do that because even then, like I'm, mentally noting, like even if she comes back and she's like, "Oh, I had my fun adventure where I didn't drown during this flood in real life," they'll be like, "Oh, okay, that's good. I'm so glad you're safe again. Okay, now back to have the ice pick put behind your eyelids."
But they also, and this is the other bone they throw us, Dorothy learns how to mask. God. There's a point where she wants to say, "Hey, Aunt Em, look, like Ozma's here." And it's like, no, don't say shit.
Hide that shit away. God damn. So it's her learning to cope with familial abuse, basically.
Well, I mean...
God, this movie it's so heavy, Doc.
I've seen people argue, like, how... there's one interpretation you can take of the original Wizard of Oz where, like, it's a... it's an assertion of conformity, where it's like, okay, Dorothy, it's nice that you had your little time in the magical land, but you got to come back to Kansas.
You got to slop the pigs. Come on.
You can't go be gay with your friends. Like, you got to be here in boring old Kansas.
You can't go west with your, living with the village people on the yellow brick road. Yeah. Cut off the chickens' heads and prepare them for dinner. And
yeah, like, sorry, Dorothy, you gotta go back to farm life, which is just gonna wear you to nothing, and you're gonna end up in a photo by Dorothea Lange.
Right. You'll be you poor but proud.
Yeah.
You'll marry your second cousin. You'll never the only time you'll ever socialize is Sundays at church, where you
maybe die of puerperal fever or live to see
your children die.
two of your 10 children survive to young adulthood.
Yeah.
Before one of them dies in a thresher accident.
Right.
Or is merely maimed for life. And then turns to alcoholism. Oh,
we have a name for that now.
But, fuck that Oz shit. It's childish. Right. Why would you even want to live in Oz? It's ridiculous. But yeah, so the original Wizard of Oz, you could take a pretty dark reading of it if you wanted to.
Yeah, if you're one of those jaded kids who grew up watching Return to Oz.
Right. Or maybe it's a little bit, I think it's more in the in line with the end of Labyrinth, where Sarah has grown up and she realizes I've been really childish and selfish, but all her little puppet friends are like, "Hey, if you ever need us, we're here."
Mm-hmm. Come be childish when you need to. Just act like a fucking grown up.
As nerds, we don't really have any room to.
Oh no, obviously not. Yeah, I have no adult skills.
I still will watch movies like Return to Oz and Labyrinth. And
yeah. I do a podcast for fuck's sake. What's self-respecting adult does that?
We could
apart from Mark Maron, I guess.
You're a big Muppets fan.
Yeah, well, Muppets are great. It doesn't matter what age you are. Oh fuck, I am a nerd.
And again, shouts out Brian Henson doing a great job in this movie, and
continuing to run the family business.
One thing that was interesting to me about another parallel between if you watch Wonderful Land of Oz and then you watch Return to Oz, mm-hmm. The voice of Jack the Pumpkinhead is really similar in both. And in Wonderful Land of Oz, you see him literally created, and he does act like someone who was created a day ago would act. He doesn't know shit.
Right.
But maybe in this movie, he's a little bit more of he seems a little bit more teenage, kind of like a slow adolescent. But they have really similar voices. Like Brian Henson is doing like a really similar voice to the anonymous person who played Jack the Pumpkinhead in Wonderful Land of Oz, which was made by the same guy who made fucking Santa and the Ice Cream Bunny.
I mean,
but it's like they both
his performance was definitive.
They both arrived at the same characterization of Jack the Pumpkinhead, like as a naive adolescent.
Yeah, well, it was because it's such a strong character. Like, how else could you play him? I mean, I'm curious, like, what performance notes, 10-year-old Fairuza Balk got on her performance. Like, is she going back and like watching old Judy Garland movies? Be like, I need to inform my process so I can act.
She was like, I'm going to do amphetamines so I can really understand what Judy was going through.
Right? Yeah. And
I hope not. I hope the industry was at least okay to you, Fairuza. Call us. We'd love to interview you.
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
Oh well, here's an important question, Tim, for you as a programmer. What do you think about the UI and UX on TikTok?
It's fairly straightforward, and I can understand that. There are 3 different processes that are not necessarily related, and I do like the emergent behavior that can come from winding up like his vocal but not his thought. He can just like run his mouth. Like, hell, he could do my part on this show. Or he can just have the thoughts going and like he's not actually doing anything. He's a literal computer, and he's got his other wind up motor function. Like it's 3 distinct processes that they all work together to create the false caricature of life.
I will also say that maybe another reason why this didn't initially kind of get over with audiences is the desire to hew so closely to the spirit of L. Frank Baum, and how like our perceptions of appealing characters have like changed over the better part of a century. Because if you go back and you look at the illustrations and the original illustrations in Oz books, you're kind of like, look up the Patchwork Girl of Oz. I'm like, this is awful. I would burn that thing. Jesus Christ.
No, it's fun and whimsical.
It's like, yeah, like, TikTok is kind of round and he's got big round eyes, but he's like, kind of like, and then...
He's no E.T., the universally loved mound of dog shit.
Oh, God. I really hate that little fucker. It makes me happy to see him face down in that fucking creek bed or whatever. I'm like, good! Fuck you!
Yeah. No, I like TikTok's design, and I understand that
it's neat.
Yeah, it was a deliberate design decision for him to be unable to crank himself off, whatever. Like because
man, that must suck when your thought was wound up, but you're not your action, so you're thinking all these horny thoughts, but you can't beat off.
Yeah, you can't crank yourself off. But yeah,
I've been there, buddy.
Right. But yeah, that had to have been a literal design decision, because I mean, all it is once TikTok has in mind, he's like, I'm sick of being the army for Emerald City. I want to be the dictator of Emerald City. No one can stop him because they have no other army, and they can't just rely on waiting him to wind down, because he'll just wind himself up anytime that he needs to. And so now you have your de facto dead ruler of Oz, who's this homicidal robot. You've got Ultron, basically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Smart.
So yeah, that was I can understand that as a deliberate design decision for him being unable to crank himself up.
Smart.
Yeah, because you need him.
Also,
to be
nobody
an
wants to see a
automaton.
robot beat off.
You might. I mean.
Well, I go to Soriyama for
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Ooh, Soriyama's returned to Oz.
Soriyama of Oz.
Spicy.
I think that was bad before.
Yeah, so I don't know, like these, and I do appreciate the attention to detail, even though I'm not like an L. Frank Baum head,
Right.
or whatever, because it's like, oh hey, that he was very close to these original illustrations. Like it's a little weird to go from like the Ray Bolger's Scarecrow, which is very expressive, to a Scarecrow who is
freaky
like his head
dead-eyed
is just
puppet.
Yeah, I'm like, and I don't know if maybe there was like a budgetary decision. There is a point where they change his facial expression. So obviously there are a couple different heads, which it's like, okay, but
Yeah, it's
not having the Scarecrow's face move was like,
it's too
might have
jarring.
vetoed that.
Even if you can justify it by saying he's a scarecrow and doesn't have a real human face, not like the original Wizard of Oz one. He's not an actor in makeup. He's an animatronic puppet. He's a grotesque mockery of life. That's your king. Like,
well, that seems to be the lot of a lot of these characters from Oz. I mean, like TikTok is like, like I'm not alive. Like fuck it, I think it's great.
Yeah, I speak
Jack
and I move and I have
Pumpkinhead.
no life. Yes.
Yeah, like Jack the Pumpkinhead, like fortunately seems like too stupid to like contemplate his own existence.
Yeah, I mean, he does take it with aplomb. He's like, yeah, my arms and legs can pop off and I can, my head might rot away. But, hey, comes with the territory.
God. Imagine like opening like Jack the Pumpkinhead's head and they're just like maggots writhing in it.
Yeah, I just got black mold just, filling out the whole inside.
Yeah, it's like when you pull the top off a Halloween pumpkin. It's just like, because there's like mold growing in it. But he doesn't have a brain, just pumpkin seeds. So
yeah, so he's fine. He's
what a dumbass.
What an untroubled life he must lead. And then that animal that was like, and again, he does allude to it too, like his condition of unlife, where what they assemble this monstrosity from two couches, some palm fronds, and the stuffed and mounted head of a gump. And even like when they reanimate him, they're like, oh, the last thing I remember was hearing a loud noise. It's like, yeah, dude, that was you being shot to death. That was your heart exploding.
Wow, so I believe the gump is some sort of extinct ungulate.
Right.
Like, I was just at the La Brea Tar Pits, so...
Oh, okay. Do you go there to see all the dinosaurs that they dug up?
It's a conspiracy! Yeah, well, I guess it's a dark world, and it's not for everyone.
It really is a horrifying return to Oz. Just everything is in decay. Anything that you loved is gone. And you're here alone as an actual child with no one to protect you. But a chicken.
But the important thing is that Dorothy has managed to live with her extended hallucinations.
Right, yeah. So enjoy Shutter Island for kids.
I don't know. I think we're done. I'll probably use a bit of you talking as Kermit.
Okay. I can try and do some bit about like, we need to traumatize the child more.
That's just Jim Henson talking.